The security guards moved through the rows with purpose, their eyes fixed on the elderly man in the blue uniform adorned with medals. The auditorium was filling with proud families for the university graduation ceremony, but their focus remained on him. The taller guard leaned down, his voice carrying just enough for nearby rows to hear. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to move. These seats are reserved for distinguished guests and family members with proper credentials." Colonel William Harrison looked up, his weathered hands resting on his cane. The medals on his perfectly pressed uniform caught the light. "I understand, young man, but my grandson specifically arranged for me to sit here. I'm waiting for him to bring my pass." The second guard scoffed, eyeing the military decorations suspiciously. "That's quite an impressive collection you've got there. Mind if I ask where you earned all those?" A murmur rippled through the nearby seats. The first guard shook his head, impatience hardening his features. "Look, sir, we have protocols to follow. Without proper credentials, you'll need to move to the general seating in the back. We can't make exceptions, even for veterans." The way he said veterans carried a distinct tone of doubt. Colonel Harrison's eyes flickered momentarily, with something between hurt and resignation, but his expression remained dignified. "I served with the Army Rangers in Vietnam," he replied quietly. "I'd rather not move if possible. My knees aren't what they used to be." The taller guard reached for his radio. "Then I'll need to call additional security to escort you out. These seats are for verified guests only." As the guard began speaking into his radio, the double doors at the back of the auditorium swung open. What happened next would leave everyone in that room questioning everything they thought they knew about the quiet old man in the blue uniform. William Bill Harrison had never been one to draw attention to himself. His small ranch house on the outskirts of town was modest, nothing like what you'd expect from someone who had impacted so many lives. Every morning, he rose before dawn, made his simple breakfast of oatmeal and black coffee, and sat on his porch watching the sun climb above the distant hills. His neighbors knew him as the kind gentleman who never failed to help when someone's car wouldn't start, or when Mrs. Peterson needed her walkway shoveled after a heavy snow. Most assumed he was just another retiree living on a fixed income, never suspecting the depth behind his gentle eyes. Long before he became the quiet neighbor at the end of the street, William Robert Harrison had been Captain Harrison of the 75th Ranger Regiment, a decorated soldier who led his men through some of the most harrowing missions of the Vietnam War. But it wasn't his military record that truly defined him, it was what he did after returning home. In 1976, when many veterans were struggling to reintegrate into civilian society, Bill founded the Wounded Warriors Rehabilitation Program, dedicating his life savings and military pension to creating a sanctuary for injured veterans. What began as a small outreach program operating from his garage grew into a nationally recognized organization that had helped thousands of veterans recover from both physical wounds and the invisible scars of war. "I never set out to build something big," he once told a local reporter who discovered his story by accident. "I just couldn't stand by watching my brothers suffer when I had two good hands and a clear purpose." One of those brothers was a young private named Thomas Miller, who had lost both legs in an ambush. When the military hospital released him with nothing but painkillers and a wheelchair, it was Bill who drove 400 miles to bring him to the program's first facility, a converted barn with just 3 beds. Today, Thomas ran the organization's physical therapy department, having earned his degree with Bill's encouragement. Then there was Maria Vasquez, whose husband returned from combat so tormented by PTSD that he couldn't bear to be near their infant daughter. Bill spent countless nights sitting with the family, teaching them techniques he had developed through his own struggles. The Vasquez family stayed together, and their daughter grew up to become a trauma counselor, working with military families. But perhaps most remarkable was how Bill operated entirely in the background. When donors wanted to name buildings after him, he politely declined. When politicians sought photo opportunities, he sent other veterans in his place. His name appeared on no letterhead, no building, no plaque. "The work matters, not who does it," he'd say whenever someone questioned his anonymity. And so as he sat in that auditorium in his dress uniform, worn only on special occasions like his grandson Michael's graduation, few could have guessed that the elderly man being questioned by security guards had personally saved over 5,000 veterans from suicide, homelessness, or addiction. The irony wasn't lost on Bill. Just yesterday, the university president had proudly announced a new veterans scholarship funded by Bill's organization, never knowing that the founder would be sitting in his auditorium the very next day. When the security guards approached, Bill felt no anger, only a familiar weariness. He'd spent a lifetime being underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. In truth, he preferred it that way. Recognition had never been his goal. But as the guard reached for his radio to call for backup, Bill couldn't help but wonder if perhaps just this once, he might have to reveal a small piece of who he really was, if only to witness his grandson's proudest moment. The world rarely took notice of William Harrison. His quiet demeanor and modest appearance made him easy to overlook in crowds, and he preferred it that way. Yet there were moments when the disconnect between how people perceived him and who he truly was became painfully apparent. 6 months earlier, Bill had visited the very same university to meet with the Board of Trustees. He had arranged to anonymously donate funds for a new veteran support center on campus, inspired by his grandson Michael's stories about fellow student veterans struggling to adjust to academic life. The development officer had kept him waiting for 45 minutes, then rushed through their meeting as if Bill were wasting her time. "We appreciate your interest," she had said condescendingly, "but our minimum naming opportunity starts at $50,000. Bill had simply nodded and asked for the donation paperwork, which he completed with a check for $2.5 million. The woman's stunned expression had been reward enough as he quietly mentioned, "No naming necessary. Just make sure it helps the right people." Now, as he sat in the auditorium being questioned by security, Bill noticed a woman a few rows back watching the interaction with growing concern. Professor Eleanor Winters, chair of military history, had recognized his name when she saw it on the special guests list. She had used his anonymous case studies in her classes for years, never realizing the unassuming architect of the largest private veterans support network in the country lived just 30 miles from campus. Eleanor stood, intending to intervene, when something stopped her. Through the open doors at the back of the auditorium, 5 uniformed men had entered and were now making their way down the center aisle. Their presence commanded immediate attention, shoulders back, chins high, moving with disciplined precision. Each wore the distinctive tan beret of the Army Rangers. The lead ranger, a general by his insignia, approached the security guards who were still hovering over Bill. The auditorium fell into a hush as he spoke, his voice carrying just enough to reach those nearby. "Is there a problem here, gentlemen?" The taller guard straightened instinctively at the authoritative tone. "Just a seating issue, sir. This area is reserved for distinguished guests," the general finished for him, "which is precisely why Colonel Harrison should remain exactly where he is." Bill looked up, momentary surprise giving way to recognition. "James Blackwood," he said softly. "You didn't have to come all this way." General Blackwood smiled. "When Michael told us his grandfather was being honored today, we wouldn't have missed it. The 75th looks after its own." One of the other rangers stepped forward, addressing the security guards. "Do you have any idea who you're talking to? This man is Colonel William Harrison, recipient of the Silver Star, Bronze Star, and Purple Heart. He personally pulled 14 of us out of a hot zone in '71 when our position was overrun." The auditorium had grown completely silent. Students in graduation gowns and families with cameras frozen mid-picture were all watching the scene unfold. A third ranger spoke, this one with captain's bars. "I wouldn't be standing here today if it weren't for the colonel, not just because of what he did in Vietnam, but because of what he built afterward. His Wounded Warriors program saved my life when I came back from Afghanistan with nothing but nightmares and a pill addiction." Bill raised a hand gently. "That's enough, son. There's no need for all this." But the rangers weren't finished. The general turned to address the growing crowd, his voice projecting through the hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have among you a true American hero. Colonel Harrison not only served his country with extraordinary valor in combat, but he has dedicated his entire civilian life to supporting those who followed in his footsteps. The program he founded has saved thousands of veterans like myself, asking nothing in return, not even recognition." The security guards had backed away, faces flushed with embarrassment. One of them was already speaking urgently into his radio, likely informing his superiors of their mistake. From the side entrance, the university president appeared, moving quickly toward them with a look of mortified recognition. He had met Bill 6 months ago, when the veteran had donated the funds for the new center, though the colonel had introduced himself simply as Michael's grandfather at the time. As realization dawned across the auditorium, Bill closed his eyes briefly. This was exactly the kind of attention he had spent decades avoiding. He had built his life's work on the principle that true service seeks no spotlight. Yet sitting there, surrounded by the men whose lives he had touched, he felt something unexpected. Not pride exactly, but a deep sense of completion. A young woman in the fourth row rose to her feet, applauding. Then another person stood, and another, until the entire auditorium was on its feet. The ovation washed over Bill, who remained seated, his eyes now searching for his grandson among the sea of graduates. But before anyone could say another word, the ceremony music began and the graduates started filing in. As they did, 5 Army Rangers took up positions around Colonel William Harrison, not as a security detail, but as an honor guard for a man whose quiet greatness had finally, despite his best efforts, been revealed. If you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, now would be the perfect moment. Each story we share carries lessons that stay with you long after the video ends, just like Colonel Harrison's legacy. The university president stepped forward, microphone in hand, his face flushed with both embarrassment and determination to make things right. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a change to our program today," he announced. "It is my profound honor to invite Colonel William Harrison to join us on stage. Colonel, we would be deeply grateful if you would accept a place of honor for today's ceremony." Bill hesitated, his hands gripping his cane. One of the Rangers leaned down. "Let them do this, sir. Not for you, for them. Some lessons need to be witnessed to be learned." With a slight nod, Bill rose to his feet. General Blackwood and another Ranger stood at his sides, not supporting him physically. Bill would never have allowed that, but accompanying him with respect as he made his way to the stage. The audience remained standing, their applause continuing undiminished. The security guards stood awkwardly to the side, one of them removing his cap in a belated show of respect. The taller one stepped forward as Bill passed. "Sir, we had no idea. I'm deeply sorry for the disrespect." Bill paused, regarding the young man thoughtfully. 40 years ago, I might have let my pride answer for me," he said quietly. "But life has a way of teaching us what matters. You were doing your job, let's leave it at that." From among the graduates, Michael Harrison watched his grandfather ascend to the stage, emotion etched across his young face. When he had arranged for his grandfather to attend, he'd wanted to surprise him by acknowledging his influence during the valedictorian speech. He never imagined the day would unfold like this. As Bill took his seat on stage, the 5 Rangers positioned themselves at the back of the platform, standing at ease, a silent honor guard that spoke volumes. The ceremony proceeded, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. What had begun as a routine graduation had transformed into something more profound, a lesson in judgment, respect, and the quiet dignity of true service. When Michael's name was called, Bill watched with eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. His grandson crossed the stage, accepted his diploma, and then did something unexpected. He removed a folded piece of paper from his gown and handed it to the university president, who read it and nodded with solemn understanding. The president approached the microphone again. "Ladies and gentlemen, our valedictorian Michael Harrison has asked that, before he delivers his speech, his grandfather Colonel William Harrison be properly recognized. Michael has informed me that immediately following graduation, he will be commissioning as a second lieutenant in the United States Army, inspired by his grandfather's legacy of service." A fresh wave of applause swept through the auditorium. But what happened next left not a dry eye in the house. The 5 Rangers moved in perfect unison to stand before Bill. General Blackwood stepped forward with a small wooden box. "Colonel Harrison, on behalf of the current generation of the 75th Ranger Regiment, we present you with this token of our enduring respect. Inside is a Ranger tab worn by a member of each generation of Rangers since your service, from Vietnam to the present day. Men like you built the foundation upon which we stand." Bill accepted the box with trembling hands. For a man who had spent his life avoiding recognition, the moment was overwhelming. But he understood that sometimes accepting honor gracefully is itself an act of service. It allows others to express gratitude that needs to be given. Michael stepped to the podium, looking out at the audience and then to his grandfather. "I had prepared a different speech," he began, "about future challenges and opportunities. But today has taught me something far more valuable. My grandfather showed me that greatness isn't about medals or recognition, though he earned those too. It's about choosing to serve others when no one is watching, expecting nothing in return." He paused, gathering himself. "I grew up knowing my grandfather as the man who taught me to fish, who came to every baseball game, who helped me with math homework. It wasn't until I was in high school that I learned he had saved thousands of veterans through his program. He never talked about it. He just did the work. In the audience, families leaned forward, captivated. The security guards who had confronted Bill earlier stood at the back, their postures reflecting their transformed understanding. "Today," Michael continued, "I make this pledge not just to serve my country in uniform, but to live by the example my grandfather set. To judge people by their character, not their appearance. To serve without seeking recognition. To understand that the most important work often happens in the shadows." As the ceremony concluded, people didn't rush for the exits as they normally might. Instead, they lingered, many approaching Bill to shake his hand or simply nod in respect. The security guards came forward again, this time to offer an escort to Bill's car, not to remove him, but to honor him. Walking beside his grandson, with the Rangers following at a respectful distance, Bill felt a sense of peace. He had never sought the spotlight, had always believed that good works should speak for themselves. Yet there was something profoundly moving about being truly seen, if only for a moment. "You know," he said quietly to Michael, "all those years helping other veterans, I never did it to be thanked." Michael smiled. "That's exactly why you deserve to be." As they reached the doors, Bill turned back to look at the auditorium one last time. The security guard stood at attention, offering a respectful salute. In that moment, he realized that his most important mission, passing on values of honor, service, and humility to the next generation, had been accomplished. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes from unexpected moments. A simple misunderstanding at a graduation ceremony revealed something profound. True character doesn't demand recognition. It simply endures, quiet and steadfast, until circumstances bring it to light. William Harrison never sought applause for his decades of service. He simply saw needs and met them, wounds and healed them, broken spirits and restored them. His legacy wasn't built on marble monuments or brass plaques, but in the lives he touched, lives that continued his work long after he stepped back into the shadows. In a world that often measures success by fame and fortune, the elderly veteran in his faded uniform reminds us of a different standard. Greatness isn't found in momentary acclaim or viral recognition. It's built daily, in small acts of kindness and quiet persistence, in choosing the harder right over the easier wrong, and in serving others without expectation of reward. The security guards who misjudged him learned what many of us forget. Beneath unassuming exteriors often lie extraordinary stories. The elderly man at the grocery store might be a decorated hero. The quiet woman on the bus might have saved countless lives. The humble janitor might be a brilliant mentor to troubled youth. We simply never know until we look beyond appearances. So perhaps the next time you encounter someone who seems ordinary or unremarkable, remember Colonel Harrison. Take a moment to consider the invisible stories that might lie beneath the surface. Extend the benefit of doubt, offer respect without requiring credentials, and recognize that true greatness rarely announces itself. It simply serves. As you reflect on this story, we invite you to share your thoughts below. Have you ever misjudged someone only to discover hidden depths? Or have you been inspired by someone whose quiet service changed lives without seeking the spotlight? Remember to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that might change how you see the world around you.